Martial art ethos. What is ethos? Ethos is just a noun, and if you Google this, you will get the following. It says the characteristic spirit of a culture, era, or community as manifested in its beliefs and aspirations. That's very interesting. As manifested in its beliefs and aspirations. So basically, ethos is the culture that is fueled or impacted or manifesting itself based on its beliefs. It's a community of people, depending on what what community we're discussing. And that community, that culture basically is manifests itself through its beliefs, through what they believe. So martial art ethos is, in a sense, an environment or the culture of martial arts, depending on which culture, which specific martial art culture we're discussing, that will manifest, that has manifestation of its beliefs. So I'm going to cover this methodically, in a sense that I wrote an article. It's called Martial Art Ethos. You could find this on our website. And I'm going to basically go through that article, put it in this audio format, and kind of discuss as we go point by point the important parts of what I had written in 2005. I released the article in 2005, but it's still as relevant today as it was almost 12 years ago. So how critical is a martial art culture? Again, there's that word ethos or culture in the society, and specifically at the martial arts institutions, and how relevant is it to the training and the development of the students? So to begin with, we need to first look at how martial art used to be taught during the ancient Asia. Now, why Asia? Well, basically, Asia is where the martial art started. Martial art started in the continent of Asia. Now, what am I referring to when I'm talking about Asia? I'm not just talking about Chinese. I'm not only talking about Oriental. I'm not only talking about Far Eastern. I hammered this in my books, in my audio bites that I put in, segments, in videos, and in many of my writings and articles. Asia is a very wide term definition for the people that live in Asia. It's the continent of Asia. So by Asian, I'm not just referring again to Oriental, which is commonly misunderstood by the general public, but I'm also referring to the entire Asia, Central Asia, Southeast Asia, Western Asia, including Persians or the Indians or any part of the Asia. Now, they may not share the same gene, but they're called Asian. And that continent, that area is called Asia. That's how we called it when we were kids. So basically in Asia, in Central Asia or Far East Asia, the promoting martial art used to be extremely secluded. I'm talking about ancient time. I'm not talking about the recent time. I'm talking, going back as far as we can trace the roots of martial arts, and as far as it can go back. We have evidence and track of it. Of course, if I may, biblical precedents also do have martial arts in it, the Old Testament, and that's in Near Asia or Western Asia, but nevertheless, it's Asian. And so the martial arts, in a sense, was, speaking now more so from a Chinese aspect, was very secluded and selective. Students were handpicked by the instructors or the masters of the schools, and instructions were generally done behind closed doors or closed gates. Now, there was a reason for that, and a lot of the martial arts of the Chinese particularly, and I'm kind of switching back and discussing more of the Chinese because that's more of its root, where it came from. They were done for the basically specific reason that was to protect and preserve the culture and their society. And there were no such thing as the student's rights. Student had to submit and accept the teacher's method, and for the most part, they, meaning the students, became part of the family or the households of the instructors and the school. Students had a very important role in the spread of the arts in general, yet at the same time they had to go through basically a process of character building and skill development, because martial arts is not just a sport. Martial art is, in a sense, again, has its own ethos, has its own culture. So it basically is meant to develop discipline and characteristics in the student. Yes, it enforces its own culture to the student, develop that culture to the student, but basically, ultimately, the student will become part of that culture, meaning absorbs the characteristics, personality of whatever that environment, whatever that culture, that ethos of that martial arts school had, they would absorb it. They will become part of it. Student, again, they had a very important role. They didn't argue with their teachers and never challenged their instructors. Some today may conclude that was dictatorship, but that's not the case. This is basically an Asian way of life. Look, we grew up that way. We grew up based on the authority, and the authority enforced discipline because they wanted you, meaning the student, the kids, us, to learn who is in charge and who is not, who is the leader, who is a follower. That's how the society is ordered, and that's how it maintains its order if it's to survive. Elders, or in this case teachers, were respected in Asia, particularly within the context of martial arts, as they're still today. Some schools even household the house students, basically, much like a dormitory in their territory, and in a way a family was formed as a result of this very tight-knit, close relationship. Even though the relationships were close, this is the key, the humility and respect level were never ever overlooked and violated by the students. The general thought was that the student went to the teachers to learn, and if the teachers or the masters or the instructors chose them to be part of the particular school, or even as a private student, the student accepted the hard and difficult challenges that were placed in front of them by their mentor. Teachers gave and students took. Teachers spoke and students listened. During this period, not even going back more than, let's say, 50 or 60, 70 years ago, martial arts in Asia were generally a distinct and separate culture all by itself. Again, I'm emphasizing that culture, though, that ethos that martial art carries with itself, and it's a huge responsibility and one that we cannot overlook. This is not just another sport. It's not tennis or basketball or American football or international Asian football. This is not that type of an activity. It has its own culture because martial art as a whole, it's a military art, it's a martial way, is the discipline that the students learn, not just from the physical perspective, but the mental as well as spiritual. So as a result of all this, bonding between students and teachers were very much part of the culture or the ethos, and discipleships was at its highest level. Society in general looked up to the schools that disciple pupils, and martial arts were then a way of life. Yes, they were a way of life. And I think that's one of the things that is being very overlooked at now in the Western society, that the martial art is just a physical activity, or go and just send your kid to some school just because, you know, you want them to just be exposed to some type of a physical activity. Nothing wrong with that, but not understanding the true meaning, the essence of martial art is what causes the people to miss the point and miss the opportunity that you can learn a correct way of life, or you can learn the correct characters that the life will require you to make it to be successful. I will get more and more detail, zoom in on, you know, what is the right and what is the wrong ethos, but let's continue for now.